Before writing, before calendars, before kings, before laws, before maps, humanity lived under a sky it could not yet explain. The world was beautiful, but it was also terrifying. The sun rose every morning, but no one knew why it always returned. The moon changed its shape in the night sky, but no one knew what controlled it. Thunder shook the mountains, rivers flooded without warning, fire warmed the body but could also destroy a home, and winter could make the earth so silent that people wondered if life itself had disappeared. In those ancient days, human beings knew how to survive, but they did not yet know how to understand. They could hunt, they could gather, they could make simple tools, they could build shelters from wood, mud, and stone. But when storms came, when disease spread, when the river swallowed the land, when the seasons changed, they had no clear answer. To most people, nature was not a system, it was a mystery. Sometimes it felt like a punishment. Sometimes it felt like a message from powers no one could see. But among these early people, there was one figure who looked at the world differently. His name was Fuxi. In Chinese mythology, Fuxi is remembered as one of the legendary ancestors of civilization, a culture hero who helped humanity move from fear toward knowledge. He was not remembered as a conqueror. He was not famous for building a palace or leading an army. Fuxi was remembered because he watched. When others hid from the storm, he watched the clouds. When others feared the river, he studied the current. When others saw darkness and waited for it to end, he watched how night slowly gave way to dawn. Fuxi believed there had to be order behind change. The world could not be only chaos. There had to be a pattern. One night, a violent storm came over the land. The sky turned black. Wind bent the trees until their branches nearly touched the ground. Rain struck the earth so hard that dust turned to mud in moments. Thunder rolled from mountain to mountain, and lightning split the sky like a blade of fire. People ran into their shelters. A child cried. An old man whispered that heaven was angry. Families held each other in the dark, waiting for the storm to pass. But Fuxi stepped outside. He stood in the rain and looked upward. He saw the clouds gather before the thunder. He saw lightning flash before the crash of sound. He saw rain fall from above, join the ground, and rush toward the river. He saw the river rise because the sky had emptied itself into the earth. And then, when the storm finally moved away, he saw something else. The air became cooler. The clouds broke apart. The next morning, the sun returned. The people saw disaster. Fuxi saw sequence. From that day on, he watched more carefully. He watched the sun rise in the east and sink in the west, again and again, never randomly, never without rhythm. He watched the moon disappear, return as a thin silver curve, grow full and fade again. He watched birds leave before the cold and return when warmth came back. He watched animals wake, feed, mate, migrate, and rest according to the seasons. He watched seeds lie hidden in darkness beneath the soil, then rise as green life when the time was right. He watched water fall from the sky, run into rivers, disappear into mist, and return again as rain. The world was moving, but it was not meaningless. Spring opened, summer burned, autumn gathered, winter closed, then spring returned. Slowly, Fuxi began to understand that all things moved between two great forces. One force was bright, warm, active, strong, and rising. It was like the sun, like fire, like heaven, like movement. The other force was dark, cool, quiet, soft, and returning. It was like the moon, like water, like earth, like stillness. Fuxi later called these forces Yang and Yin, but he did not see them as enemies. Day did not destroy night forever. Night prepared the world for day. Winter did not kill life forever. It held life in silence until spring returned. Stillness was not always weakness. Sometimes stillness was where strength gathered. Movement was not always victory. Sometimes movement without timing led to ruin. Yin and Yang were not two separate worlds. They were two movements of one world. This idea was powerful, but Fuxi faced a problem. How could he teach it to others? The people around him could feel rain, wind, hunger, cold, heat, and fear, but they had no writing, no books, no charts, no scientific language, no way to record long observations of heaven and earth. Fuxi needed a language older than words, something simple enough for a child to remember, but deep enough to carry the movement of the universe. So he kept searching. Day after day, he watched. He drew marks in the dirt. He looked at shadows. He counted the return of the moon. He noticed the shape of animal tracks, the direction of flowing water, the way smoke rose from fire, the way trees bent in the wind. He did not rush to explain. He let the world speak first. Then, one dawn after many days of rain, Fuxi walked to the banks of the Yellow River. The river was wide, muddy, and powerful. It carried branches, reeds, stones, and the reflection of the morning sky. To the ancient people, the Yellow River was both mother and danger. It fed the land, but when it flooded, it could destroy everything. Fuxi stood beside the river and listened to the water. The current moved like a voice. Then, according to legend, the surface of the river began to change. Mist rose from the water. The current turned in a great circle. Birds flew up from the reeds. The river seemed to hold its breath. And from the waves emerged a mysterious creature, the dragon horse. Its body was like a horse, powerful and alive with motion, but it carried the spirit of a dragon, ancient and otherworldly. Water streamed from its mane. Its hooves touched the river as if the river itself had lifted it into the world. The people who saw it stepped back in fear. But Fuxi did not run. He looked at the creature's back. There, among its scales, were strange markings. They were not ordinary spots. They were not random shapes. They looked balanced, arranged, intentional, as if nature had hidden a message inside a living body. Fuxi stared at those markings for a long time. The river moved behind him. The sky brightened above him. The earth stood beneath his feet. And suddenly he understood. The world could be read, not with ordinary words, but with signs. Fuxi knelt beside the riverbank and picked up a stick. In the wet earth, he drew one single unbroken line. It was strong, whole, continuous. It was like heaven, like sunlight, like movement, like the power that rises and acts. This was Yang. Then he drew another line, but this one was broken in the middle. It was open, divided, receptive. It was like earth, like shadow, like stillness, like a valley receiving water. This was Yin. The people watched in silence. 2 lines, one solid, one broken, so simple that anyone could see them. But Fuxi knew they held something enormous. With these 2 signs, he could begin to describe the forces of the universe. Then he drew again. He placed 3 lines together, one above another. Sometimes all 3 were solid. Sometimes all 3 were broken. Sometimes solid and broken lines appeared together in different patterns. From these combinations came 8 symbols. These were the 8 trigrams, 8 ancient symbols made from solid and broken lines, used to represent the patterns of nature and change. Fuxi gave heaven a symbol, Ching, 3 solid lines, pure creative strength, the vast power above. He gave earth a symbol, Kun, 3 broken lines, open, receptive, and nurturing, the ground that receives all things. He gave thunder a symbol, Zhen, the sudden force that awakens life. He gave wind a symbol, Zun, gentle but everywhere, entering through every space. He gave water a symbol, Kan, deep, dangerous, flowing through darkness. He gave fire a symbol, Li, bright, beautiful, rising, and transforming everything it touches. He gave mountain a symbol, Zhen, still, firm, and stopping. He gave lake a symbol, Dui, open, reflective, joyful, holding the sky upon its surface. At first, the people did not fully understand, so Fuxi taught them through the world they already knew. He pointed to the sky and said, "This is heaven." He touched the soil and said, "This is earth." He listened as thunder rolled in the distance and said, "This is movement beginning." He felt the wind pass through the grass and said, "This is the unseen force that enters everywhere." He watched the river and said, "This is water. It can nourish, but it can also be dangerous." He pointed to the fire burning near the shelters and said, "This is fire. It gives warmth, but it also changes what it touches." He looked toward the mountains and said, "This is stillness. Then he looked at the quiet pools left by the rain and said, "This is reflection. This is openness." Slowly the people began to see. The world was not just a collection of frightening events. It had relationships. Thunder belonged to movement, water belonged to depth, fire belonged to brightness, mountain belonged to stillness. Earth received, heaven created, wind entered, lake reflected. The 8 trigrams became a map, but not a map of roads, villages, or borders. It was a map of change. For the first time, people could look at nature and see more than fear. A storm was no longer only punishment from the sky. It was heaven, wind, water, and thunder moving together. A flood was no longer only destruction. It was water becoming too powerful, water leaving its proper path. A season was no longer a mystery. It was a cycle, a return, a turning of yin and yang. This changed everything, because once people began to see patterns in nature, they began to see patterns in life. A leader could be strong like heaven, but if he never listened, his strength could become rigid and dangerous. A family could be gentle like earth, but if it never acted, its patience could become helplessness. A person could move like thunder when the time was right, or wait like mountain when action would bring harm. Fuxi's lines were not only about the sky and river, they were about human choices: when to move, when to stop, when to speak, when to listen, when to be firm, when to yield. The 8 trigrams taught that wisdom was not doing the same thing in every situation. Wisdom was knowing the pattern of the moment. If fire appears, it may bring warmth, but it may also demand caution. If water appears, it may offer life, but it may also hide danger. If mountain appears, it may tell you to stop, to hold, to wait. If thunder appears, it may tell you that something new has begun. In this way, the 8 trigrams became more than symbols. They became a way of thinking. They taught people to ask better questions. What kind of moment is this? Is this a time for action or patience? Is this a time for strength or softness? Is this a time to rise, to receive, to adapt, or to stand still? Centuries later, these symbols became connected with the Ching, or Book of Changes, one of China's most important classics. But in the beginning, before books and commentaries, before scholars debated meanings, the idea was born beside a river. A man looked at heaven, earth, thunder, wind, water, fire, mountain, and lake, and he drew lines, solid and broken, simple and profound. Over time, these symbols influenced Chinese philosophy, medicine, architecture, astronomy, martial arts, and strategy. They shaped the way people thought about balance, timing, direction, health, leadership, and fate. In traditional Chinese medicine, the body was understood through balance and relationship. In architecture and feng shui, direction, wind, water, mountain, and space became part of how people imagined harmony between humans and the environment. In martial arts, hardness and softness, stillness and motion, attack and retreat echoed the same old pattern. In strategy, knowing when to advance and when to wait became a form of intelligence. But the heart of the story is not complicated. Fuxi taught humanity that the world could be observed. Fear could become understanding. Chaos could become pattern. Mystery could become meaning. Imagine the ancient people again. The same thunder still shook the sky. The same river still flooded after rain. The same winter still brought cold. But something had changed. Now, when the storm came, they did not only tremble. They remembered the signs. They remembered that thunder was movement. Water was danger and wisdom. Earth was receiving. Heaven was power. Fire was transformation. Mountain was stillness. Wind was influence. Lake was reflection. They had not mastered nature, but they had begun to listen to it. That was Fuxi's gift. Not control, understanding. And perhaps that is why this myth has lasted for thousands of years. Because every human life still feels like a world of change. There are bright seasons and dark seasons. There are moments when everything moves too fast, like thunder. There are moments when life feels deep and uncertain, like water. There are times to rise like fire and times to stand like a mountain. There are times to open like earth and endure. There are times to move gently like wind, unseen but powerful. There are times to reflect like a lake and understand what is above by looking at what is below. Fuxi's 8. Trigrams remind us that change is not the enemy. Change is the nature of the world. The danger is not change itself. The danger is failing to understand its rhythm. Long ago, beside the Yellow River, Fuxi looked at a world that frightened everyone else. He saw storms, darkness, floodwater, fire, mountains, seasons, life, death, and return. And instead of turning away, he asked one question: what is the pattern? Then he drew one solid line and one broken line. From those 2 lines came 8 symbols. From those 8 symbols came a way to read the universe. Before writing, before science, before maps of land and sea, humanity's first map of change may have been this: a line unbroken and a line broken. Heaven and earth, yin and yang, fear and wisdom. And with them, Fuxi began to turn chaos into order.